Right.
Thanks, Sean. A couple questions for you. First, does President Trump have audio recordings of his conversations and meetings with the former FBI Director James Comey?
The president made clear in the Rose Garden last week that he would have an announcement shortly.
Do you have any sort of timeline on when that announcement will be?
When the president's ready to make it.
And a quick follow-up on the Attorney General. From the perspective of President Trump, what role did Attorney General Jeff Sessions play in the firing of James Comey?
I'm not going to discuss private conversations between the president and the attorney general.
Sean, to that end, when Jeff Sessions testifies tomorrow, do you believe that he should invoke executive privilege on conversations between himself and the president as it relates to Jim Comey?
I think it depends on the scope of the questions, and it would be to get into a hypothetical at this point would be premature.
And in any way, did Jeff Sessions, folks at the DOJ, ask for the White House's permission, in essence, for him to testify publicly tomorrow?
I don't know the answer to that question. I know Congress, generally speaking, sets the whether a hearing is open or closed based on the sensitivity of the subject.
Is the president then okay with him testifying in this open setting tomorrow?
I think he's going to testify. We're aware of it, and go from there. John.
Just to follow on that, the president seemed to indicate that he thought that it was a mistake for Jeff Sessions to recuse himself from the Russia investigation. He said that his preference would have been to the contrary on camera. What does the president think about the fact that Sessions will be testifying tomorrow and, according to the Department of Justice, wanted to testify in an open session rather than a closed classified session?
I think the president's been clear last week in the Rose Garden that he believes that the sooner we can get this addressed and dealt with, that there's been no collusion. He wants this to get investigated as soon as possible and be done with it so he can continue with the business of the American people.
If I could ask you about the other headline of the day, the state of Maryland, the District of Columbia filing a lawsuit against the president,
right.
Seeking rulings on 2 points in the emoluments clause of the Constitution. What does the RNC thinks that this is bogus lawsuit? What does the president, what's the White House's perspective on that?
The president's interests, as previously discussed, do not violate the emoluments clause for reasons that length that the Department of Justice filing enumerate in their Friday night filing with respect to the Crew lawsuit, which was the first one. This lawsuit today is just another iteration of the case that was filed by that group Crew, filed actually by the same lawyers. So it's not hard to conclude that partisan politics may be one of the motivations behind the suit. The suit was filed by 2 Democratic attorney generals. The lawyers driving the suit are an advocacy group with partisan ties. It actually started with a press conference as opposed to filing it, which is interesting. And the suit challenges the sort of business transaction that everyone from Penny Pritzker, who served in the last administration, and others have engaged in while office. So I think we'll continue to move to dismiss this case in the normal course of business.
Thanks, Sean. I wanted to just 2 questions, but first, why leave open this question of whether there are tapes? Don't the American people, do they deserve to know whether Comey was lying to the Senate? I mean, why leave this question open?
I think the president made it clear what his intention is on Friday.
But it's an open question.
I understand that, and he said he would answer that question in due time.
To follow up on speaking of lawsuits, for the Ninth Circuit, they just came out and they upheld the block of the travel ban. Any response to that?
We're currently reviewing that opinion. I think we can all attest that these are very dangerous times, and we need every available tool at our disposal to prevent terrorists from entering the United States and committing acts of bloodshed and violence. We continue to be confident that the president's executive order to protect this country is fully lawful and ultimately will be upheld by the Supreme Court.
John.
Hey, Sean, so 2 questions for you then. I want to follow up on the tapes issue. If the president does have evidence that the FBI director lied under oath, what is he waiting for?
I think the president made it very clear on Friday that he would get back as soon as possible on this and his position on that conversation.
Right, so what is he waiting for? What's the delay?
He's waiting. He's not waiting for anything. When he's ready to further discuss it, he will. But I think he laid out his position very clearly, very concisely on Friday. Olivia.
On the travel ban, Sean, is the second question. You just mentioned, you obviously responded to the Ninth Circuit ruling today. That ruling also cites the president's tweets from June 5th on the travel ban. It cites your statements, this administration statements, that the president's tweets are official statements. So given that measure, given that the travel ban is obviously a priority for the president, how is it that the president is not putting his own agenda in danger when it comes to his Twitter habits?
I think the bottom line is, as I just noted, I mean, cases should be decided on the rule of law and on that. And when you look at the when you look at what the law is in the U.S. Code that allows the president to do whatever he has to, that's what we were deciding on. And frankly, I think any lawyer worth their salt 100% agrees that the president is fully within his rights and his responsibilities to do what is necessary to protect the country. Olivier.
Of course, the judgment
Olivier.
on the Twitter question, Sean, it's a different question, though. It comes
Olivier.
to the Twitter
Hi.
issue. So
Olivier.
I just would love
Thank
to get
you.
you on that question. Sorry.
Thank you.
But
Olivier,
really, 'cause
thank
that's
you.
a separate question.
Sean,
Thank you.
what is the president's reaction to the Russian government's crackdown on anti-corruption protests today?
Are you speaking in general or with respect to?
Well, Mr. Navalny in particular, but I assume that would be part of your overall
Right. No, I just want to be clear. We're talking about the same thing. I think the United States strongly condemns the detention of hundreds of peaceful protesters throughout Russia that happened on June 12th. Detaining peaceful protesters, human rights observers, and journalists is an affront to core democratic values. The United States will monitor the situation, and we will call on the government of Russia to immediately release all peaceful protesters. The Russian people, like people everywhere, deserve a government that supports an open marketplace of ideas, transparent and accountable governance, equal treatment under the law, and the ability to exercise their rights without fear or retribution.
Can I get one more? The president mentioned a press conference in a couple weeks on the ISIS review. Can you say where and when, and has he made a decision about changing the policy?
When we have an update on his schedule, I'll let you know, but we don't have one at this time. Francesca.
Thank you, Sean. You said that the president wants to see this Russia investigation and all these investigations wrapped up as soon as possible. He said on Friday that he would be willing to testify under oath. Can you say when he would be willing to do that? Would he be willing to do that before Congress goes into recess to get this done as soon as possible?
I think he was actually specifically asked whether or not he would talk to Director Mueller, and he made it very clear what his position was.
So he would.
John.
So sorry. I just wanted to be very clear about this. So he's not saying that he would go before Congress.
I don't know. I've not had a further discussion with that. I know exactly what he said on Friday in the Rose Garden is exactly what he believes.
Confidence in Director Mueller,
John.
Sean?
Thank you, Sean. Two questions. Does the president have a reaction to the vote in Puerto Rico yesterday, the non-binding measure calling for statehood as the first choice of the people for their future?
This matter is something that's going to be determined now that the people have spoken in Puerto Rico. This is something that Congress has to address. So the process will have to work its way out through Congress.
Hey, Sean.
My other question was, there are widespread stories and speculation that when the president goes to Miami this Friday, he will undo the executive orders from the Obama administration that eased relations with Cuba. Can you confirm whether he will undo all of them or some of them?
That's a good try. I will say that when we have an announcement on the president's schedule, we'll let you know. But just stay tuned. We have a very busy week and an ambitious agenda this week. George.
Thanks. Following on some of the stories over the weekend in England, when the president signs off on a foreign trip, how much does he factor in his personal popularity in that country?
None. And so since you brought it up, I don't, just so we're clear on that, Her Majesty extended an invitation to the president. He's accepted that invitation, and we look forward to scheduling that trip. But there's nothing that was scheduled, and we look forward to working out a mutually acceptable date with the United Kingdom, and then looking forward to sharing that date with you all when we have it. Lee?
Thank you. Following up on your India announcement, the president in his speech to the Indian American community on October 15th in New Jersey had said if he's elected, he would be the best friend of India ever in the White House. What steps President wants to take during his next 4 years or 8 years probably to implement his promise he made to the community here?
Well, I know, and we've read these out a few times, but the president and the prime minister have had a number of positive phone conversations and expect to further that discussion when they meet in person on June 26th. As I mentioned just a moment ago, whether it's economic growth and reforms, fighting terrorism, expanding our cooperation as major defense partners. U.S.-India trade has grown sixfold since 2000, from $19 billion to $115 billion in 2016, and the Indian economy is growing at over 7%. U.S. energy and technologies, including natural gas, are helping to build Prime Minister Modi's vision for a new India and creating thousands of U.S. jobs in the process. I think you can expect the two of them to set forth a vision that will expand the U.S.-India partnership in an ambitious and worthy way of both countries' people. Jessica?
Sean, thank you. 2 questions on trade. Number one, you talked about the beef arrangement Is that beginning today, and can you flesh out a little bit more about what, because I understood there was going to be an announcement from USDA. Are we waiting
Yeah.
for that to actually
They'll-
make this
that's-
a fact, or where are we in the process?
The U.S. Department of Agriculture will have many more details on the process moving forward, but the announcement's coming from them today.
The shipment leaves today?
No, I think the announcement's coming today.
And secondly, my other quick question is on steel and aluminum and
Yeah.
the review that the administration's doing. The president said, and was quoted in one of the pool reports as saying that there is legislation being drafted on anti-dumping. The 232 process goes to Congress anyway. Was he referring to additional legislation or the 232 review that you'd already initiated as reported by Secretary Ross?
So Secretary Ross should have a further update on the review, the 232 review later this week, I believe. When that comes out, there are certain recommendations that will be made to Congress to address anti-dumping provisions in the steel and aluminum and other markets. When that comes out, but I think there'll be recommendations to Congress to follow up on how to rectify some of the problems. Thank you. Have a great Monday. Take care. Hope to see you in Wisconsin.
No LGBT month proclamation.
Afghanistan update?